Gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Caribbean Development Bank Second Indigenous Peoples Forum. My name is Sheena Zuniga. I am the president of National Garifuna Council of Belize. I am also the vice chair for the Belize Network of NGOs, the chair for the Belize Indigenous Council, and a proud member of the Caribbean Development Bank Indigenous People Advisory Group. As we gather here today for this Indigenous Forum that allows us as Indigenous people to have a space to collaborate and speak about issues that affect us. Today, we come together under the team Catalysing Caribbean Canada collaboration on Indigenous Peoples Affairs for Resilient Prosperity. This forum is a testament of CDB's commitment to empowering Indigenous communities and fostering inclusivity development. As we commence this forum, let us acknowledge our ancestors, Mother Earth, our histories and cultures, and our contribution as Indigenous people. Our ancestors' wisdom and resilience continue to inspire and guide our efforts toward a more inclusive and prosperous future. This gathering is a testament to our shared commitment to honoring and advancing the rights of Indigenous people as enshrined in the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP, and the International Labour Organization's Convention 169, ILO 169. These cornerstone documents provide a robust framework for protecting the rights and aspiration of Indigenous people worldwide. They remind us of our obligation to ensure the development initiatives are inclusive, equitable, and respectable for Indigenous heritage and values. The Caribbean Development Bank remains dedicated to integrating these principles into the strategic priorities. Their focus on social resilience, economic inclusivity, and sustainable development aligns with the vision of fostering resilient prosperity for Indigenous communities. By leveraging our collective strengths, resources, and expertise, we can catalyze impactful collaborations that address the unique challenges faced by Indigenous people and create opportunities for our growth and success. Over the next 2 days, we will engage in insightful discussions, share best practices, and explore innovative solutions that bridge the gap between policy and practice. Our aim is to build strong, lasting partnerships that drive positive change and ensure that Indigenous voices are heard and respected. Thank you for being here. Let us embark on this journey with open minds and open hearts, united in our purpose and determination to achieve resilience for all. To begin the ceremony, I would like to call on Algonquin Anishinaabe Elder Verna McGregor from the Kitigan Zibi Anishinaabe First Nation to offer a blessing. Elder McGregor.
Kwe kakina, bonjour tout le monde, hello everybody. For non-indigenous, kita konsibi ni don jaba wagosh ni do dama shicho nim kipanesi, ni tonjiminen don ni don ni sonche nongo. Hi, my name is Verna McGregor and I'm from Kitigan-Zibi, Anishinaabe, which is 120 kilometers north of here. I'd like to welcome you to our traditional unceded lands. What does unceded mean? Amazingly enough, we never signed treaty similar to the treaties out west, a number of treaties with the lands here, and I said because the bush was too thick and we were able to hide, but no. But I'm very honored to be here, and really quickly I do have a background in economic development within my community, but also on a national, and I also have a banking real estate background as well, but I live in my community right now, and I've also worked with the elders all these years too, so it was like we have this concept of two-eyed seeing is, I said that too as well, you have the native understanding and sometimes the non-native understanding. So it's very, it was foretold actually because the Algonquin Anishinaabe were known as the Mamaninawak, which was the nomads. Why we were nomadic too as well is that if you stayed in one place, you overharvest the resources. So we would move here. And when I say Wagish, my clan on my mother's side was Wagish, which is fox, and my father was Onimki Panesi, which is thunderbird. And our clan system was based on the watershed. And the significance of Ottawa here is that you're at the confluence of the rivers coming together here from the four directions. It's similar to the medicine wheel. And at the center represents balance. And I find this interesting that Parliament Hill today is at that confluence. And we would meet here in the summer and talk about what's going on the land because of the clan system was a system of resource management. We also had trade prior to contact. And I want to thank everybody for the tobacco. We call that Nasema. And this was part of protocol, but it was part of also our creation story. It was one of the first gifts given to us. So anytime you harvest anything from the earth, or you ask somebody to do something, to share knowledge or ceremony, there would be an offering of tobacco. So people wonder why I was getting a little tobacco. But I used to say too as well before that, I said, speaking in public's kind of nerve-wracking, so I'd have to go outside and do a smoke afterwards. No, but that's not it. It was actually, this became one of the most lucrative also commercial goods after contact. But for us, it was used in ceremony. It was one of the sacred medicines, like the sacred medicines of the four medicines on the medicine wheel, which starts with tobacco, sweetgrass, sage, and cedar, and that's our understanding. So on that note, I'm just going to, what I did before you arrived to is I smudged the room. And why do we smudge too as well is that it's to honor also to clear the air in the room, but also to bring in good energy. And this also too as well, what I do with this is I offer it to the sacred fire or I offer it to the falls because that understanding is the tobacco also is our connection from the physical world to the unseen world. So you bring your wishes, the smoke takes up your wishes or the mist. And we would trade this, we trade tobacco with our Haudenosaunee brothers and sisters, which were the Iroquois, because they were more agrarian. Well, if you look at the terrain here, it wasn't very conducive to farming. So what we would do is we were more hunter-gatherers. So, and that was our trade system. And it's interesting though, really quickly before I say my prayer here, I was at Home Depot on Friday. And one of the, I bought a chair, so this young man helped me to bring it to my car. And he said, well, first of all, I had so many books in the back. He goes, why do you have so many books? I said, well, this researcher's given me all his research. And it's on the Ottawa River watershed. And also the American eel, which was one of the species that was basically wiped out. Then he goes, oh, you're Algonquin? I said, yes. And I said, we're known as Omamaninawak. And he said, did you know? He said, one of the most interesting things I learned in my course, he said, is that the Algonquin and other northern tribes or nations had trade all the way down to Peru. I said, yes, yeah, we did. I knew that. I said, and it's interesting, I said, because that was, the rivers were our highways. And I brought my little canoe here to show we're known for the birch bark canoe, and there's teachings to that. It's always about balance. It's to honor everybody's journey. But the other part too as well is the rivers were our highways as well. And also trade is still important today with the river system too. It's one of still the most economical, it's the most economical system for the delivery of goods and services. But it was foretold, though, too, as well, would be we still have the wampum belts, the original, on the Seven Fire Prophecy belt. And we're in prophecy today, too, I think, because it was foretold the coming of the newcomers here from the to Turtle Island, from the four directions. But there'll come a time where we'll be at a crossroads where we're developing too much. And we're at this crossroads, I believe, now, where we come together or we continue on the same route, what we're doing in terms of our development, and it's to the detriment of the next 7 generations. So that's why I'm very honored to be here today, too, as well, because I think we need to come together, and one of the parts of this prophecy will be the seeking of Indigenous knowledge as to why we were here and why we did the things we did and why we understood the lands, too, as well. So on that note, I'm going to get you to stand. Because it's also, too, as well, you all ate a good breakfast, so it helps you digest. And I'm just going to say a little opening prayer. And afterwards, unfortunately, I can't stay very long. I have another international meeting down the street. There's a lot of international people here today. And, but also, though, too, as well, it's to honor all of you for the work that you do. So I say, miigwech. Onje nigashki tojama on dose konshe nongo moame kakina pamatz jikten is wa gonshe. Shwen mishnon in abigus. Migwech onje kakina gagishan don onje mom de gen in the kimanon. Shkaki question kason in the kimanon. We do kwa kakina pamatz jikten is wa gonshe. Onje ya dashi shunya kewin. Migwech onje kakina mom de gen in the kimanon. Ashich kakina gujetek kishagon kises to be kises a shijanong shak. We do kwa yan and okamis non oje and agadawab don kakina guch nibi pangsing, CB, Saigon, Kichigagam. Migwech oje ishkude, gagi mijen, chimino abjetoyong. We do kwa kakina mam de gain nimishom se non keys, say na biggest. I should we do kwa kakina ninua goje and agadawab don kakina guch ishkude. I should chikwa goje and agadawab don kakina guch nibi. Migwech oje na sewin, gagi mijen, chimino pamatsian. We do kwa kakina mam de gay dajakus a jig no go mama ya COVID-19 a shish kakina go jakus win. We do kwa kakina ninjino and dogana gonje mam de gay nimshom sinan ne goknes nan a shish and don't denis onje non go monje ya ne dabano jishak. Kanche squat ne gwe de simen kego gan man do a shish kana noj guch ne gwe de simen we do kwa kakina mam de gay wesi sak kakina go just sin wag mitigog mijashki mashkiki. We do question we do kwa ya. A shit, we snajik the marcus a jig, kaye, we, me God, we jig non gum. We don't question. Me gwetch, me gwetch, me gwetch, me gwetch. Me gwetch is thank you in Algonquin, and I say it 4 times to honor the 4 directions, the 4 seasons, the 4 stages of your lives here as you do your earth walk. And also, too, as well, I do this because we are at the center today, too, of these 4 directions. And I honor the work that you do. And really quickly, too, as well, what I mentioned, too, we're going to have drummers. And we have Eagle River from our community, and they're going to drum for you. And just to give a little teaching on that, too, as well, the drum also represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And you drum in honor of being alive. Because also, too, as well, one of our teachings, too, is that that the women are so connected to Mother Earth that also, too, as well, if you go to powwows, you see that the big drum was given to the men so that they can connect also to the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And in my prayer, too, I say that the men are fire keepers and the women are water keepers. And it's that balance to bring in the next generation. So I think, too, as well, banking plays a role because of the interconnectedness of everything today. But for us, too, as well, our ancestors, we were one of the first to meet the explorers. And I noticed, too, in a language, we say $1, $2, we say Pejigwabik, Nijigwabik. Pejik is 1, 2, 3 is Pejik, Nij, Niswe. A bik represents metal. And I said, oh, it's because they gave coins, but also understanding, too, with the banking system. that the currency was also once backed by gold and silver, and that led to the demand for minerals, which is another part of our colonization. So I think this is part of also this healing and understanding. So I wish you a good day, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the room really quickly and smudge, and then I have to leave, but I'll try and come back. I'm just going down the road, but I'll be back. Miigwech, everybody. And I'll be canoeing down the road.
Miigwech, Elder McGregor. There is more to say about Elder McGregor. She is an esteemed elder of the Algonquin Anishinaabe from the Kitazan Zibe Anishinaabeg First Nation in Quebec. She embodies the wisdom and resilience of her people as a dedicated member of the Algonquin Nation's traditional grandmothers and elders. Elder McGregor is deeply committed to preserving and promoting the Algonquin language and culture, ensuring that the rich heritage of her ancestors endure for future generations. In addition to her cultural and linguistic advocacy, Elder McGregor works at the Minnewashi Lodge, an Aboriginal Women's Support Center in Ottawa, where she provides invaluable support and guidance to Indigenous women. Through her work and dedication, Elder McGregor continues to be a beacon of cultural preservation and community support within the Algonquin Nation and beyond. You can be seated. Thank you. Anita van der Den Belt is Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Development. Anita van der Belt was first elected as the Member of Parliament of Ottawa West, Nepan in 2015. Ms. van der Belt is an international expert in democracy and human rights. She has worked in over 20 countries on inclusive governance and women's leadership, including with the United Nations Development Program, Democratic Governance Group in New York. There, she managed a multi-partner international network that aimed to promote women's political participation. Ms. van den Belt was also a senior advisor with the UN in Bangladesh and with the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, mission in Kosovo. In 2008, she was awarded the Canadian Peacekeeping Service Medal in recognition for her work in Kosovo. In addition, she also served as a resident director of the National Democratic Institute in the Democratic Republic of Congo, worked with OSCE in Bosnia, and worked with the Canadian Parliamentary Center on post-difficult democratic development in the Balkans. She also conducted a study on women's leadership for UNDP in Vietnam and trainings on women's leadership in Haiti. Born and raised in Alberta, she obtained her undergraduate degree at the University of Calgary before completing a Master's of Arts in History at York University. At this time, I call on Anita van der Belt, Parliamentarian Secretary to the Minister, to deliver remarks on behalf of the land. Thank you.
Thank Good morning. Bienvenue, Kwe. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you so much for that beautiful blessing, Elder McGregor. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Caribbean Development Bank Indigenous Peoples Forum. I'll begin my remarks with a land acknowledgement. And as we're here to learn and build our understanding, I think it's only fitting to take a moment to share a bit about this practice. Land acknowledgements, as we know them today, come from a historic Indigenous diplomatic custom. When an Indigenous person found themselves on another nation's territory, even if only passing through, they would announce their presence with a land acknowledgement. This was a way of recognizing the nation responsible for preserving this territory and making it clear that the speaker comes in peace and respects the land and the people who call it home. Today, this custom has been revived to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples that occupy the territory where meetings and gatherings like this one take place, and to acknowledge the speaker's relation to that land. So with that in mind, I'm speaking to you from the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. The Algonquin people are the customary keepers and defenders of the Kitchissippi, known to many as the Ottawa River. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations and peoples to this beautiful territory. We also talk about our own relation to the land. And in my story, I was born and raised on Treaty 7 territory, on the prairies, in a city called Calgary today that is where the rivers meet. And it always was a gathering place. And I think, as we heard earlier today, it is very fitting that I've spent the last 25 years of my life in this place where the rivers meet, which is also a gathering place. And particularly fitting that we are all gathered in this place today. As many of you are joining us online, please take a moment to reflect on the land that you come from, the land where you're currently living and where you're working today, and the connections with Indigenous peoples. Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui parce que nous partageons la conviction que la construction d'un avenir durable et résilient passe par la construction d'un avenir équitable. We want a world where all people can succeed, regardless of their background, their territory, their race, or their socioeconomic status. We want a more sustainable, prosperous, and peaceful world, but that cannot be achieved without the meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples. Meaningful participation means ensuring that Indigenous peoples have a say in matters that affect them, in the spirit of nothing about us without us. This includes providing more space for Indigenous peoples to connect with one another and to share their experience and expertise, including at international events like this one. It means amplifying the voices of Indigenous youth, women and girls, persons with disabilities, and other historically marginalized groups. And it means working collaboratively and co-creating programming with Indigenous peoples, which Canada is very excited to be doing through the Partnering for Climate initiative as just one example. Indigenous peoples hold critical knowledge and traditions that can provide solutions to some of the world's most pressing challenges, such as sustainable natural resource management, climate resilience, and better food systems. As we walk the path towards sustainable development and engage in discussions about the future of Caribbean countries and how best to bring greater economic opportunities for all, we must also walk in the shared path toward reconciliation and equality for all. I look forward to today's forum and the work that we will continue to do together. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Miigwech.
Thank you for your remarks and land acknowledgement on which we gather and for your ongoing commitment to honoring Indigenous territories and traditions. It is now my pleasure to welcome Greg Sarzin, Chief of the Algonquins of Pikwaknogan, First Nations to offer his welcome remarks. Chief Sarzin, the current chief of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, brings a wealth of experience and a profound connection to his community. Born and raised in the vibrant Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, located in the picturesque shores of Golden Lake and the Bonner-Chair River in Renfrew County, Greg's roots run deep within his ancestral land. As a successful entrepreneur, he owns 2 businesses and shares his expertise by teaching courses in the traditional art of building bark canoes. Elected to serve a 3-year term in March 2023, Chief Sarzan leadership is built on a solid foundation of previous experience, having served as chief from 1987 to 1989, and as the chief negotiator for the landmark Algonquin land claim from 1991 to 2001. Chief Sarzan's dedication to his community and its cultural heritage is evident in his lifelong commitment to the prosperity and sustainability of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Chief Gregory Sarzan to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Kwekwe, Pajashin. That's hello, good morning, greetings, and welcome. My name is Greg Sarzan, and I am the chief of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation. I've been asked to provide the opening and territorial welcome here today as we undertake this 54th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, with this year's theme, Partnerships for Resilient Prosperity. I'm happy to do that, but first I would like to set the stage. This building that we're in right now, this entire city, including the Parliament buildings, the Supreme Court of Canada, all of it resides on unsurrendered, unceded Algonquin lands. When European cultures first came up the great river of the Algonquin Nation, the mighty Kitchissippi, the Ottawa River, as is more commonly known today, into our Algonquin homelands in the 1600s. The Algonquin Nation was here, occupying and defending our homelands, where we have been since time immemorial. We are still here in 2024, and we will continue to be here for the next 7 generations and beyond. I would like to pause for a moment and acknowledge the truth of our collective past here in Canada so that we can be reminded of what needs to be reconciled as we move forward in this time of truth and reconciliation. I want to acknowledge all of our First Nation residential school victims, like my childhood friend, my uncle Joey Commanda, who never made it home. He died while escaping from that residential school. He was only 13. I also want to acknowledge all those residential school survivors who did make it home, like Joey's brother Rocky and all the others who made it home, and whose lives were forever changed by that horrible experience. I acknowledge our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and the work being undertaken to address that terrible legacy and to bring an end to it. I acknowledge all of the 60 Scoop survivors who were taken from the cradle and denied their families, their culture, and their heritage. And despite all of that, and as I mentioned earlier, we are still here today in 2024, and we will continue to be here for the next seven generations and beyond. You meet here this week on the banks of the great river of the Algonquin Nation, the mighty Kitchissippi in the heart of Algonquin traditional territory. And I'm happy to welcome you here to do your business the Algonquin Nation has always been a welcoming people. Today, Pikwakanagan First Nation is located south of the Kitchissippi in present-day Ontario, and our Algonquin brothers and sisters, First Nations, are north of the Kitchissippi in present-day Quebec. I want to acknowledge our Algonquins and Pikwakanagan members who make Ottawa their home. Your home may be in Ottawa, but it is also in Pikwakanagan. And I want to acknowledge all First Nations across Turtle Island. I wish to acknowledge our Algonquin ancestors going all the way back to the beginning, for without them, we would not be here today. And on behalf of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, I'm happy to welcome all of you here today into our traditional homelands. May the Creator protect you and keep your families safe. Miigwech.
Thank you very much, Chief Sarzan, for your warm welcome and your history of the Algonquins. At this time, I would like to invite Damian Curry to the stage. He will be giving remarks on behalf of the Indigenous peoples from the Caribbean. Damian Gerard Curry is a multifaceted leader, serving as the faith keeper and hereditary clan chief of the Eagle Clan of the Lakota Arawaks of Barbados and Guyana. He is a committed environmental entrepreneur, founding First Nations investments to promote sustainable development among Indigenous companies. Curry, dedicated to Indigenous rights, is notable through his long-term involvement with the Organizations of American States. From 2000 to 2016, he was a member of the Indigenous Working Group on the draft American Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, contributing significantly to the document that was formally adopted by the OAS General Assembly in 2016. Since 2007, he has been an active participant in the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, advocating for the rights and recognition of Indigenous peoples on a global stage. His influence extends to the Caribbean, where he co-founded and co-presides over the Caribbean Amerindian Development Organization since 2012, and serves as the chairman of the Indigenous Democracy Development Organization since 2016. As a published author, Curry has written 10 books available in soft copy on Amazon, sharing his knowledge and experiences. In 2021, he created and directed First Nations Productions, the first and only fully Indigenous-owned and operated grassroots Caribbean native film production company, showcasing Indigenous stories and talents. I welcome Chief Curry to the stage to give his remarks.
Halekwaha. Glad to see so many beautiful people in this place. Nota bene, I'm reading this on behalf of Brother Chief Ricardo Barath in Trinidad of the Caribbean Organization of Indigenous Peoples. Sata Morocco, Mabrika Mabrika, I greet you in one of the indigenous languages of our ancestors and give thanks for the blessings of the Great Spirit. It is just 1 year ago that the Caribbean Development Bank made us aware of its Indigenous Peoples Initiative. After a period of fruitful discussions, delegates were brought together in June 2023 to share our views and be part of a plan of action for empowerment of the Indigenous peoples of the region. It is widely acknowledged that the Indigenous peoples and tribal groups from the Caribbean region have demonstrated resilience and courage in spite of the misunderstanding and discrimination coming from historical wrongs and perceptions. It is important to note that the Caribbean Organization of Indigenous Peoples was formed in August of 1987 with the aim, among other things, to provide a forum for discussion and collective agreement among members towards promoting the cultural and economic welfare of our communities. As a network, the chair of the COIP rotates among its members from St. Vincent and the Grenadines to Belize, Dominica, Guyana, and currently in Trinidad and Tobago. The organization operates on a voluntary basis but remains resilient and strengthened by ongoing communication and annual meetings at its current headquarters in Arima, Trinidad and Tobago. We are therefore particularly pleased with the initiative taken by the Caribbean Development Bank, where we see the promise of support to increase our visibility and work towards a permanent secretariat for greater recognition and development. The COIP has always advocated that the authorities must come to the place where they recognize the intent of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which address both individual and collective rights, cultural rights and identity, rights to education, health, employment, language, and others. It outlaws discrimination against Indigenous peoples and promotes their full and effective participation in all matters that concern them. The Declaration does not make any group better than the other, but recognizes the unique and inherent rights of the Indigenous peoples. These rights should be adhered to in the countries which have signed the Declaration. In developing policies and laws, planners look to best practices in other countries as a guide to their own projects. Let us follow the best practices in relation to the Indigenous peoples and leave a level playing field for our youth. However, as advanced by Professor Marie-Belle Antoine in the 2022 celebration of the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples in Trinidad and Tobago, there is also the continuing struggle against the threat of extinction, perhaps not physically, but the loss of identity and culture as traditional knowledge is forgotten. First Peoples communities must be strengthened. Preserving culture, traditional knowledge, including language and unique practices, and preserving the environment that supports livelihoods and provides the gateway for this goal. The CDB has remained true to its commitments and has emerged as a champion of our cause. We are here together again in Ottawa to further our plans. Thank you, Bui. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry, for the remarks on behalf of the Indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. To officially open the forum, I am honored to invite Teresa Turner Jones, Acting President Operations for the Caribbean Development Bank, to deliver the opening remarks. Teresa Turner Jones is a Bahamian national and resident of Bridgetown, Barbados. Having recently spent a decade in Kingston, Jamaica, between 2013 and 2022, she worked as the Inter-American Development Bank, where she served as General Manager of the Caribbean Group. Her purview spanned IDV operations in Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, and her home country, the Bahamas. She is currently the Acting Vice President Operations of the Caribbean Development Bank after managing Max Gwen Limited, a consulting firm she founded in 2022. A trained economist, Mrs. Turner Jones has over 30 years' experience in macroeconomics and economic development, with special expertise on the Caribbean and Latin America. She served the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in senior posts for over 20 years, both at a staff and board level. She holds a master's degree in economics from the University of East Anglia, United Kingdom. She is also an alumnus of the University of Toronto and United World Colleges. Her publications include a book on Caribbean fiscal challenges, a member of the International Women's Forum. Mrs. Turner Jones is passionate about financial inclusion, gender equity, children, vulnerable communities, and the environment. She is an ardent champion of development issues facing small island developing states, and considers climate change one of the most existential threats of our lifetime. A tennis fanatic, she is married to Dennis Jones, a former IMF economist They are proud parents of 3 daughters, Bronwyn Huggins, Eleanor, and Rianne Jones. At this time, I welcome Mrs. Teresa Turner Jones to the stage.
Thank you, Sheena. That was rather embarrassing. I'd rather be introduced as a water keeper this morning. I also want to just take in the fact that this room has been smudged, and I think it has brought an extra energy to these meetings, and I really want to congratulate the Canadians for having us go through that ritual this morning. Let me first say, on behalf of the bank, all of my colleagues here, a huge welcome, one, for being in Ottawa, especially those of us who had to fight with Air Canada to get here. We can provide some technical assistance on how to run an airline. But seriously, we're starting the meeting in 10 minutes. I'm going to be extremely brief. I want to just say how important it is to be here, to be acknowledging Indigenous peoples, not just in Canada, but all over our region. And I'd like to remind everyone here that it was a year ago, I think, that Isaac Solomon opened the first Indigenous forum, if I'm not mistaken, at which point Isaac referred to it as a momentous event. And so it's really very heartwarming to be at another momentous event here in Ottawa, especially having heard what we heard about the history of this place we're currently standing in. So with that, I just want to emphasize how important this work has been for the bank. Despite the fact that a year ago was the first inaugural event, the fact that we are deepening our work, our engagement with Indigenous peoples across this region is extremely special. It's also special that we are having this as the first official event of the 54th meeting, because it really takes us back to our roots. So I want to acknowledge all of you people who are here from your various communities, and especially the Mayan community, because it's really just after 6 o'clock in Belize and they're online. So I also want to acknowledge them and others who are joining us. It really is not a stretch to put on an event like this, which is bringing Canada-Caribbean collaboration to catalyze efforts towards resilient prosperity for Indigenous peoples. We're very proud of this work. I just want to say what it is that we're doing it and why we're doing it. And again, I have a quote from Isaac, why this work is important for us, because it situates our work given our history, which he described as a reckoning with the past and expanded collaboration of the future. That's why we're here. I think that captures this strategic alliance and the reason why we're having the second staging of the forum. We recognize and honor Indigenous people in our region as the original inventors, healers, especially our healers, and explorers, and as leaders and contributors to sustainable development through a number of ways, but particularly through food security, biodiversity conservation, climate resilience, and more. Yet, we acknowledge that there are barriers that they disproportionately face as a result of weak social and economic development, exploitation of natural resources that we heard this morning, and also threats to their knowledge systems. I was trying to understand what the knowledge systems meant. I went up to camp to say, what is that? But I learned a lot from the elder about exactly why these knowledge systems are important. So we understand that there's much more to learn and to be done differently, but also to be done better. As such, in last year, we launched the Indigenous Peoples Initiative, built around the pillars of mutual respect and benefits, demonstrated by design, which included a commitment to research to ensure an evidence base of the current context and contributions of Indigenous peoples, the crafting of an engagement framework based on Indigenous knowledge, as well as lessons learned and good practice around working with Indigenous peoples and in Indigenous communities, and the development of a framework of support, including culturally appropriate mainstreamed and targeted efforts over the short, medium, and long term. On a personal note, I really like the fact that in Canada, it's now appropriate to acknowledge Indigenous peoples in events like these, and I look forward to the day when we do this in the Caribbean at every single event. Thank you. Our efforts are grounded in the development imperative, social justice, and the promotion of and protection of the rights of Indigenous peoples. We have therefore been working very closely with Indigenous peoples across the region under the guidance of an Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group consisting of Indigenous and tribal leaders, some of whom are with us today. This group played a key role in the design and execution of this forum, our forum which we're having now. Progress made to date has been supported by the consultants, the Institute of Gender and Development Studies of the University of the West Indies, MONA, and with the goodwill and in good faith of the Caribbean Organization of Indigenous Peoples, chaired by Chief Ricardo Barath Hernandez, along with many other Indigenous peoples. I understand that we will have the final report and framework proposal in hand in the next quarter, and hope we can soon thereafter agree on the way forward. Our consultation today is one example in keeping with our commitment made last year to keep the channels of communication open. We also heard during consultations of the importance of establishing and strengthening Caribbean, Canada, Indigenous peoples' connections, reestablishing, strengthening those connections, and we look forward to this being realized. On the 20th of June, leaders of Indigenous peoples and tribal groups will meet with CDB's Board of Governors this week, actually. 20th of June is a couple of days, as well as with the bank's management to share perspectives and proposals for strategic partnerships coming out of this workshop. We look forward to sharing today's discussions with you, to hearing your feedback in a few days, and importantly, to working more closely with you to realize positive development outcomes for both the current and future generations. Let's take the smudging that we experienced in this room into the next room and throughout this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Therese Turner Jones, for your insightful remarks and for setting the tone for our forum. Now, we'll be treated to a drumming ceremony by the Eagle River Singers. The Eagle River Singers is a traditional drum group that consists of Algonquin men from the communities of Kitigan, Zibe, and Barrier Lake. The group is named after the river that runs through the territory of both communities. Please join me in welcoming the group. Thank you, Eagle River Singers, for that powerful and moving performance. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Kozer Frederick, Minister of the Environment, Rural Modernization, and Kalinago Upliftment of Dominica. Minister Frederick is presently the Minister for the Environment, Rural Modernization, Kalinago Upliftment, and Constituency Empowerment in the Government of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and Member of the Parliament of the Sally Bay constituency, which includes the Kalinago territory. He serves on the Dominica Reparations Committee and the Kalinago Events Committee, and is the former Kalinago Affairs Development Officer and school teacher of the Sally Bay Primary School in the Kalinago territory. Honorable Frederick holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in History with Political Science from UWI UWI Cave Hill campus, and has presented locally, regionally, and internationally on Kalinago heritage as an MPhil candidate. He was the country coordinator of the International Caribbean Ties exhibition produced in the Netherlands in 2019, and is credited for being the founder of the Sally Bay Heritage and Restoration Project in 2015. He served as a member of the Board of Directors of the National Broadcasting Corporation 2007-2008. Minister Frederick co-authored archaeology and anthropology research papers, published articles on Kalinago in magazines online, and was a co-curator for the Kalinago live exhibition. Honorable Kozer Frederick is a researcher, advocate, educator, martial artist, musician, and visual arts, and worked closely with numerous youth organizations, civil groups, and village council, and the Kalinago Council. At this time, I'd like to welcome Honorable Frederick.
Brothers and sisters, friends, today I'm honored to add some insights on a discussion that is an essential aspect of our collective progress, our inclusion in our own development. I join you from Waitikubuli, which we all refer to now as Dominica, and which for many moons have been the last stand of the Kalinago Nation. Today, we must indeed catalyze Caribbean-Canadian collaboration on Indigenous peoples' affairs for resilient prosperity. Why must we do so? Our communities across the region possess a wealth of knowledge, culture, and traditions that enrich our societies. Our unique Indigenous perspectives, honed for generations, offer invaluable insights into sustainable living, environmental stewardship, and community cohesion. However, for too long, our voices have been marginalized and our contributions clearly overlooked. This has changed, however. The government has taken a different approach. The CDB has taken a different approach. And today I stand as a testimony to this, serving as the minister in the cabinet responsible for the entire nation and also responsible for the Kalinago community. Our government respects Kalinago governance. And in so doing, the collaboration of the CDB have also rooted this respect for traditional knowledge and governance. And all of this is rooted in the culture and value of our people. Our government also respects our self-determination as a principle, that we have the right to freely choose our own sovereignty without external compulsion or interference. Friends, Dominica understands that true development is inclusive, it is equitable, and must respect the dignity and the rights of all people. I'm really happy to have a collaboration with the CDB and to ensure that the CDB understands this as a major concept that will forever become a legacy of a regional agency. And so friends, by involving us in decision-making processes, my government and the CDB have ensured that development is not only just, but it is also much more effective and resilient. Friends, our government have realized that empowering us really means recognizing our sovereignty, protecting our lands, and more importantly, valuing our cultural heritage. It really means, friends, that our voices need to be listened to. Our choices need to be respected. And there has to be tremendous support for all our visions moving forward into the future. I believe once we embrace this inclusive approach, we pave the way for a more harmonious and a more sustainable world. Friends, brothers and sisters, today I believe we must all commit to championing the rights and the inclusion of all Indigenous peoples, ensuring that we are active partners in the journey toward a better future for all. Brothers and sisters, it is with utmost respect and honor that I join this very progressive development by the CDB to ensure that the voices of First Nations across our region and also in Canada is respected, and that the many years of discounting the importance of our voice in development can come to a progressive conclusion, and that we can all put our voices, our hearts and hands together to ensure that the development across the region remain inclusive of all of those, for those who came, for those of us who are already here, and for the 7 generations to come. And brothers and sisters, I want to thank you for this morning, and I'm hoping that we will have a fruitful discussion moving forward as we continue to build partnerships both at the regional and the international level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Frederick, for your inspiring address and for your continued advocacy for Indigenous people in Dominica. As we conclude this opening ceremony, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to all our speakers and performers for their contributions. Thank you to each of you for joining us today in person and virtually. We look forward to a fruitful, engaging forum as we work together to catalyze collaboration for the resilient prosperity of Indigenous communities. Thank you, and let the discussions begin.